Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Passionate Professional series. My name is Tunde Kukoyi, and I'll be the host of tonight's episode. The Passionate Professional series is an offshoot of the Passion and Purpose of, which is a channel on YouTube that shares useful knowledge that helps you to maximize your knowledge so that you do not just enjoy success, but also fulfillment in your personal and professional lives. Welcome to episode 23 of the Passionate Professional series. I must apologize for the break in transmission, but just wanted to let you know that I'm back and better. Sometimes life can be overwhelming. But yeah, thank you to everyone who's either been watching this program, joining us live, or watching the replay. You guys make this all worth it. As you know, the Passionate Professional series is an interactive session, so it's not just a two-way conversation between myself and the guest. It's a three-way conversation between myself, our passionate professional, and you as the audience. You people make it all worth it when you ask your questions, when you pop in your comments, your suggestions. So, as much as possible, please interact with us using the chat feature in the box. The aim of the Passionate Professional series is to get you to see that if these passionate professionals from across all walks and spheres of life can can do what they do and bring out the best in the world through living out their passions and making significant contributions to the world, then there's no reason why you can't do it as well. It's just like bringing a candle towards the fire, and the more you get closer to the fire, then you're able to spark up that light within yourself as well and start living out a passionate life. Our guest for today is already in the studio. He's already here and is here to add some value to us. But as usual, before I bring the guest up today, I would like to ask a question. And the question for today is this: how often do you compare, complain, and criticize? How often do you compare, complain, and criticize? Now, you might wonder where I got this from. How often do you compare, complain, and criticize? I was just reading a book recently, and I don't know if anyone else has read the book. The title of the book is Think Like a Monk. And in the book, the author Jay Shetty was talking about how another monk he had learned from talked about the concept of cancers of the mind. Now, although I work in healthcare, I'm not really sure if they are cancers of the mind. I don't want us to focus on whether they are really cancers, but I think the aim of what he was trying to say was that these are actually just the way a cancer is destructive to our physical health. These are actually destructive to our mental health. And they call these three C's, the three cancers of the mind: comparing, complaining, and criticizing. So the first one is comparing. How often do you compare yourself to other people in the workplace in terms of their achievements, in terms of their status, in terms of their promotions? And how does that make you feel? The second question is, how often do you complain? How often do you complain about how people are not meeting up standards, or how the organization is not doing the best, or in your own terms, the organization is meeting up your demands? How often do you do that? And how does that make you feel? And the third one is, how often do you criticize people at work? How often do you criticize your bosses, your colleagues, your superiors, and perhaps people that are in lower positions to you? And how does that make you feel? It has been shown that these things actually rob us of our happiness. The more you compare yourself to others, the less you actually, or the more you find that you feel lost. You don't really find yourself because you're comparing yourself to others. So the recommendation for that is, instead of comparing yourself to others, why not compare yourself to your previous self, to your previous achievements? How are you doing? Rather than comparing yourself to others. Now, how about complaining? Um, I think it was Erin Ford that said that don't find the fault, find the solution. A lot of people complain, 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 and you find that if you stare at people that complain too much or complain a lot, you find out that they kind of tend to wear you down. So how often do you complain? Instead of complaining, how about finding the solution and recommending solution? I know someone that he was a leader of an organization, and he used to tell his the people working in the organization that I'm not saying you should not complain, but if you bring to me a complaint, then I want you to recommend three solutions. And guess what? People stop coming to complain to me because, and it just shows that we as people, we actually complain a lot instead of finding solutions. So that's another thing we should do: start finding solutions. And the last one, criticizing others. When we criticize others, we actually seem to find the negative in them. And when we find the negative in them, we also find the negatives in ourselves. So instead of criticizing others, how about finding the good in others? At work, I remember when some colleagues were complaining about a particular set of other colleagues, and I was like, well, yes, you can say that, but how about if you think about the good things that they've done? And if you think from that perspective, you find out that we all have faults, we all have imperfections, but if you seek out the good in others, it helps you to seek out the good in yourself. So this is my recommendation. Stop complaining, stop criticizing, and stop comparing. It will definitely make you miles better in your professional and personal life. So enough with the introduction. I'm ready to bring up our guest for today, and I'll start by reading this bio. Okay. So our guest for today is Nigel Smith. Sorry, just going to take away the banner so you can see his bio properly. That's better. Okay, our guest for today is Nigel Smith. Nigel is a project management professional at one of Silicon Valley's fastest growing private tech companies called Sitetracker. He's also the immediate past director of professional development at the Project Management Institute's UK chapter. He's a long-standing member of Toastmasters International, where he's currently president at PMI UK Changemakers. He's an aspiring writer, he's a speaker, he's an avid reader, he's a visual storyteller, a world traveler, a music lover, and a car fan, although not necessarily in that order. He's passionate about bringing out the very best in himself and others. As such, he always seeks out great opportunities to learn, have fun, and share his world, particularly with those who get him thinking and drive his curiosity. And basically, that's what brings Nigel Smith here today. So, join me as I welcome to this virtual stage Nigel Smith. Hi, Nigel.
Hi, Sunday. Good evening. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for coming up on the Passionate Professional series.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Good. How's your weekend been?
Weekend's been great so far. Just a bit of a shame it's going to come to an end in just a few hours, but then the next challenge, of course, is the next week and looking forward. But so far, so good, I have to say.
I like how you put it. The next challenge of the week coming up.
Indeed, yeah.
All right. So I know I've read your bio, Nigel, but I always like people to, you know what? It's just like a bio is like, oh, this is my CV or this is a script I've prepared, and then just teach the script and then say, okay, tell us about yourself. So tell me about yourself. If this was the first time I was meeting you, obviously you will not be reading out your bio to me. You'll be telling me more about yourself. So can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm sure that's quite a few that are listening in here right now, I'm from a career perspective, I'm a project manager. I've been a project manager in the IT industry for about 20, 25 years now. And I'm a very analytical, structured type person. So it sort of works towards my benefits and strengths in that department. So that's my career sort of sorted in that sort of term. I'm sort of in the leadership management potential of trying to deliver big business transformations to software customers. But I live in rural Worcestershire, not too far away from Stratford. I live with my partner Sue and dog Brody. And as some of the things I like doing, it probably wasn't on that list you shared there, Sunday, but I like walking the dog. And today, because it was particularly wet this morning, he came back rather muddy. So got him all cleaned up and everything else. Spent the afternoon with some friends, so social connections. And indeed, the friends that I spent lunch with today were people I've known since I was 16, so I left school with them. And I often think that the friends you find early in your life are the ones you want to hang on to, certainly when you're at my age, because I guess I'm pretty much at the winter or entering the winter of my career. So, yeah, for now, it's all about, for me, learning, growing, self development. And I think certainly that question you asked of the group earlier about, complaining, comparing, and criticizing. I think is valid to all people of all ages, because I've been guilty of all those things over the years, and have taken a step back and thought about them very differently in the way that you've mentioned. But let me just get back onto myself a little bit. What about my hobbies? What I'm interested in? Yes, I like reading books now and again. I like active holidays. I do like travel. Very early on in my life, I wanted to see the seven wonders of the world. I can't even name them now. I've probably seen three of them, but it got me around. And the more I traveled and saw different cultures, made me think in a more broad perspective, because diversity and inclusion, I know we know today it's highly, highly desirable for any team environment, but I was just learning in those sort of former years. So I love the traveling aspect. I love the social aspect, and from some of the things that we've got in common, Tunde, certainly the professional development angle in making yourself a better version than you were yesterday or last week or last year. Really sort of gives me that inner fire to sort of go onward and upward. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned in recent years is, frankly, that I am enough. And if I just reminded myself of that at a younger age, and that life has a way of coming towards you over your career years, then that would have probably held me in good stead. Whether or not I would have listened to it as a 19 or 20-year-old is a different thing. But because you want to change the world, don't you? You want to conquer the world.
Yeah.
You're going to live forever, and you never think you're going to die. And as you get a little bit older, you start to feel a little bit more mortal, shall I say? But maybe some of that wisdom way back when would have held out good. But I'm glad I've had that sort of epiphany over the last few years. So I'm starting to see life through a different lens, and that's making me a little bit more settled, grounded, and quite frankly grateful for what I have rather than what I haven't got.
Wow. You kind of like went through the whole plan for today. Like you talked about yourself, your hobbies, you talked about your advice for
Okay.
younger, but we'll
Okay.
we'll still come to that in more
Sure.
detail. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. I was just gonna ask, you mentioned you've seen three of the wonders of the world. Which of them? I mean, if you can remember. I can't even remember the
Oh,
seven wonders of the
grief.
world
Oh,
now.
God. Well, these are probably the ancient wonders of the world. I don't quite know
Yeah.
what the modern ones are, but I have actually climbed Ayers Rock. Yeah, you can't climb it these days, I don't think. I don't even know if that's on the list. I've been to the Grand Canyon. Is that one of them? Not sure. I think about the others a little bit. I'm not too sure. Dive the Great Barrier Reef. I think the Great Barrier Reef's one of them either. But been to Machu Picchu in Peru. Tried to get into less sort of commercialized, sort of too yet to be discovered cultures, and have experiences, if you like, rather than holidays, for
Hmm.
example. But oh, grief. Now you've got me thinking. Probably don't know what they are, to be fair. So they've been traveled a lot extensively across the UK, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years, because we've been country bound because we've got the small dog. But in previous life, when I was a lot younger, yeah, I'd be going out far flung places. I had when I was really young, I wanted to fly around the world, and what that meant was flying out from the UK, going east, and keep going east until I got all the way back round. So that took in Hong Kong, Australia, Hawaii, the US, and back to the UK, and that fulfilled at a very young age a very simple goal for me, which is to fly around the planet, just to realise actually, even at that tender age, how small the place and the planet that we live on really is.
Yeah, I think you mentioned going for experiences rather than holidays. And that's one thing that many of us, we just want to go for holidays, but it's the experiences that we hold on to, the experiences that we remember. And yeah, I agree with you. The more you travel, the more you learn. That's a form of learning that we sometimes underestimate. Traveling is actually an education. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that wonderful introduction. You said something as well in your introduction, and that struck me. You said you've been in project management for 25 years. I mean, if you take me back to 25 years ago, I didn't know there was anything called project management as a career. And it seems everywhere I turn to now, everyone is just there's this newfound hype about project management. I work in healthcare, but what exactly is project management about? What's it like on a
Okay.
day-to-day basis?
Well, frankly, Tunde, everyone on the planet is a project manager, because a project is simply a series of activities, actually a temporary endeavor to accomplish a particular need. And you can actually treat life like a project, because as like a project, life has got a beginning, something happens in the middle, and then there's an end and an outcome. And so, I mean, typically the art of project management probably came more to the fore. You could argue it was like Henry Ford when he productionized a Model T about 120 years ago, wherever it was. And that's actually where the Gantt chart came from. If people are familiar with those, those charts with all the bars and stuff on. But I think project management as an art and a science, and I'll call it an art as well, because there's things in it that do need to be understood, very process driven. But I do think there's also very soft, I call it power skills, personal, interpersonal skills development that goes with it as well. Probably picked up probably after the Second World War, when the world pretty much had to rebuild itself. And if anyone's ever heard of predictive or waterfall or traditional style project management, that's when it sort of came about. You do this, then you do that, then you do something else. And projects really fundamentally are to use a bunch of resources, which could be time, people, materials, to deliver a specific outcome and to get a result. So, for example, if you want to build a building or a highway or some developments, then you start out with what your goals are. You set out all your resources, you do your plan, pretty much in that sort of waterfall method, and you get your output at the end. Now, of course, maybe about 20, 25 years ago, many of you will have come across the concept of agile project management, which fundamentally sort of turns traditional project management on its head a little bit. And the agile part is all about being a little bit more iterative. And of course, we've had the internet explosion, we've had the software explosion over that particular period where, for example, if you're going to build a hotel or a tower block or a road, pretty much you know what it's going to look like, and you know how long it's going to be, and you know what materials it's going to be made of, and you know where it's going from and to. In the world of software, very often, although people might have a vision of what their outcome is, they might not know at the start what it's actually going to look like. And so the agile part of it is more about empowerment of the team to self-optimize and self-organize and work through problems and issues themselves and report back with show and tells, so that actually through progressive elaboration, the solution starts to get more towards what the customer wants, particularly if I don't know what they want at the outset. So, for example, you could say a project, I want a transport solution for London. Now, you might think that transport solution might be a taxi, but it could turn out to be a skateboard or a three-seater bicycle. They don't really know what the output is from the start, but they want a better solution for the end. And so you might start out with a prototype that looks like a skateboard. You might get to a go-kart or maybe to what you call a three tandem thing on a bicycle. You might end up with a small coach or a bus or something like that, but you don't have that specific outcome in mind when you start it. So that revolution has gone on, and most projects these days are sort of what you call hybrid, combination of traditional and more flexible approaches. I trust that sort of made sense. I'm trying to put it as simple as I can.
I was just going to make a joke about that because I was at work yesterday and I was doing some scans, and the person I was doing kind of looked at it and said, "Oh, that is very clever because I don't understand most of it." and at the start, I felt I could get most of it, but at some point, I'm like, "No, that's getting too clever for me." But in any case, yeah, thanks for sharing a bit more about project management with us. And that's why that's one of the reasons why I kind of like go outside my niche, because I feel like if you're in the same box, you can't think outside the box. Well, someone says that if you're the smartest person in the room, then you need to leave that room and go into another room where there's smarter people, because that's how you get better. Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing more about project
You're welcome.
management with us. Next question I'm going to ask you. I know you've touched up about this is the Passionate Professional series. What are some of the things that you are passionate about, and how has that? How did you find out these are the things you're passionate about, and when you do them, how do you feel about them?
Okay, so the things I'm passionate about are trying to be. You touched on it already, Tunde. Being
Yeah,
the best version of myself, whatever that means. And I have to
yeah,
say, I don't really have an answer to that, but I
hmm,
do want to be better than I was yesterday. Very often, I take that from feedback I get from trusted advisors and people around me that help raise me. But fundamentally, I'm interested in seeing how far I can go with passions and desires. So I want to be the best in my field. as best as I can be and give that value. How I measure that is different and also very subjective, but it's stuff that gets you out of bed every morning with a bit of spring in your step. You know, if you've got something that's pretty mundane or routine, you want to sort of break
Yeah.
that cycle a little bit. I often try to think that every day is a school day. So, you know, what have you learned something different at the end of tomorrow or even the end of today that you didn't know when you woke up this morning? Those type of things. I like to push myself into across boundaries and barriers. And it's interesting you mentioned about think outside the box. My modern style of thinking now, Tundi, is saying, what box? Why do we have to put a boundary around it? You know, so
Yeah.
there's also a classic one about pushing the envelope or wherever it might be. I think at the moment, I mean, one of my passions is, and it's interesting actually. I'll just sort of segue into a particular story. So for anyone that checks out my LinkedIn profile, you'll notice that I've written project professional, coach, conference speaker. Okay. Now, sometimes in life, you have to say out loud what you want to become, and then you can make it happen through your actions. So, I did this a couple of years ago, and I was felt very awkward about putting conference speaker down because I wasn't actually a conference speaker at that time, but that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
be. And back
Yeah.
in 2022, I had the opportunity of speaking at a world conference, and I thought, "Well, I've hit the button. I've hit the nail on the head. I've done it. I'm a conference speaker. I've hit it. That's fantastic." That was 2022. 2023, I had two opportunities of conference, one on a global scale, one on a European scale. I thought that's pretty good. I've got to keep this going. And then this year, 2024, I've got no less than five opportunities on the world stage to be a conference speaker. So I'm beginning to believe that what I set out to do, I'm achieving. And the one great thing about doing it and pushing in that direction is the more you do of the thing that you love and have the passion for, the more sort of opportunities come your way. So the reason I've got five opportunities this year is because I delivered two um, workshops to the world stage last year, and people come and approach you. They have conversations with you, and they say, "Could you adapt that to do this to this particular type of audience?" Sometimes it work out. Sometimes it works out. Sorry. Sometimes it doesn't. But fundamentally, you put yourself in a prime position to at least have that conversation. And the power of your network, fundamentally, as it grows, your network becomes your net worth. So you're able to have those conversations and drive things further forward. So I guess it's by a process of marginal gains. So small changes each day make a big, big difference over a period of time. But whereas in the early part of my life and career, I mean, I guess we all leave school and university thinking everything's all about pass and fail, right or wrong. So sort of come out that system thinking can't fail, can't fail, can't fail. The problem I found in my early career that the fear of failure stopped me trying to do things because I knew I'd
Mm.
get it wrong. And the culture I was sort of raveled in at the time was if you get something wrong, that's bad. You get blamed, you get the finger pointed at you. As I've started to get a little bit more mature and a little bit more experienced, I really am of the feeling. I know a lot of people subscribe to this anyway, but it's fail fast and learn even faster, frankly. And I
Yeah.
think, again, that combined, Tunde, with feedback you get from your peers around you can get you to realize what you're good at and what you're not so good at. And I think for me, what I'm good at, they're my strengths. I will always play to them, not overuse them because sometimes too much of a strength is a weakness. But the things I'm not really great at, I will either get other people to do them or I'll avoid them. There's a reason I'm not good at them, and it doesn't motivate me to do things I'm not good at. So I leave that to others if I can, or if I have to do it, I'll do it the best I can. But I know it's not going to be great. I just want to focus on the great things I'm about. So, for example, to put that in some sort of analogy, if there's any football fans online, if you got Lionel Messi in your football team, although it's the same game, you probably wouldn't play him in goal. He might save a few. He's likely to let a few in, but you know where you're best playing him on the pitch. You wouldn't play him at the back, for example. You'd play him midfield and up front because you know that's where you're going to get the best from him. So same rules, same game, but if you're playing different positions, you can get a completely different outcome. I just drive to try and find my niche.
Well, thank you. So, from what you've said, I gather first is you're passionate about becoming better every day. That's the personal and professional development. And then getting feedback, asking yourself, what have I learned today? And taking opportunities as well. and
Mhm.
that's how you become the conference speaker. It was when you shared that, someone also shared something. It said, "Say it out loud what you want to become." I think you said that at
Yeah.
some point.
So
Yeah,
yeah, sorry, Tunde, just to bring that to life a little bit.
yeah.
I mean, you might get around to asking it later, but inspirations in my life and famous quotes and things. So I'm a big motorsport fan. I really love Formula One. And there was something that Lewis Hamilton said 4 years ago now, probably the last time he won a race, to be honest. But I'll take you back to October 2020 when he was driving down the pit lane in Istanbul after the Turkish Grand Prix, and he'd won his seventh World Drivers' title. And as he was driving down the pit lane, he was giving a lot of advice to a lot of young kids, saying, "You can do this, you can do that, anything's possible." One of the key things he said was, "Speak it into existence, say it out loud." And I've got to
Mm,
say, everybody talks a lot about affirmations, every day in every way, I'm getting better at X, Y, or Z. You do these things, and it can certainly propel you to wherever it is you want to go. So I thought that was a great statement, one of my favorite quotes, because fundamentally inside I am actually an introvert, so it's really difficult for me to vocalize and verbalize certain things. But when you say it with meaning and purpose, it can actually sort of drive forward. And again, if you trust, your peer group who you respect, they can help bring you and be your accountability partners for taking you forward.
wow. But there's a lot of nuggets that are dropping, and I can see that someone's also picking them up as well. Um, Paul Balaji is also picking them up, and he said, "Fail fast and learn, and you learn even faster. Play to your strengths and focus on what you're good at."
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's move on a bit further
Sure,
because we still have a few things to discuss, Nigel. We still
sure.
have we still have to extract some gems from you before we let you go
Okay,
today.
keep digging, keep digging.
Okay, so next question is, tell us about some of your values. What are some of your values?
Values.
Yeah.
So my number one value is trust.
Mm,
Um, I think I need to sort of position this. So in the early part of my career, I worked in the automotive industry in and around the Midlands here in the UK. Very male dominated environment. Very whoever shouts the loudest gets stuff done. Very dogmatic, hierarchical, single driven. And that made me realize the only way you get things done was by telling people what to do. And that wasn't me internally. But again, like I mentioned before, I was a bit of an introvert. It's a really difficult environment for me. And it wasn't until I left that I realized it's all about developing relationships, as in get to the people side of the issue first. If you get the people and the relationship side correct, the task will follow and you get it done right and correct. If you start with a task without building the relationship, certainly what I've learned, it tends to fail. So for me, it's about developing trust. Okay, get trust with people, build a connection, build a rapport. Then I think that's a really solid baseline. And the other two values that I sort of use the word value quite highly is responsibility, in that
mm,
people need to not necessarily know their swim lanes. I suppose it's going back to like the Messi example playing football, but if you're playing in a certain position, you've got a certain responsibility of what you do on the pitch, what you're expected to do and how you work for everything else. So really it's about, if you say you're going to do something, then do it, or tell people why you can't. So the worst thing I don't like is people commit to things and then just falls by the wayside, or they're late. When that personal responsibility, I find, has to come from within, and that is something I really do look for. And then I've only got three key real values, and the third
yeah.
one is energy. And I think
Mm,
I would much rather work with people that have got bucket loads of energy and have got the right attitude. They might not have the right skills to do what they need to do, but if they've got that open mindset and they've got that energy to try and, maybe fail fast and learn, but at least bring everything they've got for their A game with a willingness to want to learn and move forward. That's really what I look forward. So that's trust, that is responsibility, and that is energy. There are others, but for me, those are the three key ones that I tend to look out for.
yeah, I think I've been knowing you for some years now. I think I can vouch that you actually demonstrate all three. Yeah, trust. You build trust with people. Responsibility. I know when you say you do something, you will do it, and you probably will be the first person to get there. And I'm out for that. And energy as well. You bring out energy wherever you go. So yes, I'm sure you definitely live out those values. Next question I'm going to ask you is about a challenging time in your life, because when we talk about passion, people sometimes think that, oh, if you have passion, then everything's going to go smoothly for you, as long as you're a passionate person. But it's just like passion is just like the fire, but that's not the only bit of the equation. You also need commitment and you also need resilience as well. So can you tell us about a challenging time that you had before and how did you go through it? Because that's something that we can learn from as well.
Yeah, I think just to position an answer to that question, Tunde, before I do answer it, there's been times in my career where I've been promoted too fast and got somewhere too soon and suffered, I guess, what you call it today as imposter syndrome, because I thought I'm not worthy of this. And equally, there have been times when I've just been stagnating and hanging around, thinking, well, nothing's happening. I'm better than this. I can add more value, I can add more contribution. Instead of being here, I should be here. But it's worth also saying that in the last 20, maybe 24 years now, I've actually been made redundant 3 times. Or I think the technical term for redundancy is restructuring. But effectively, on each occasion, I've been surplus to requirements. And the very first time that happens, it's like you take it personally because it's very difficult to take it any other way. But fundamentally, redundancy is all about the role is not available, or rather, the role's not suited rather than the person. And then the second and third time these things happen, you sort of live beyond it. What's the worst that can happen fundamentally? You're going to see yourself through it. You know what's got you to this point in the future. Sorry, at this point in time, you know what's going to take you to a point in the future, and you just tend to regroup. But just so the reason I mention that is because the third time I was made redundant, believe it or believe it not, was just prior to the offset of what we now knowingly love as COVID-19. Okay, so maybe the December in 2019, I was let go, and I was sort of okay with it because it's like, okay, new chapter, new opportunity, get into a different industry. Project management is a fairly generic, transferable skill. Got the right attitude, should be able to fit in somewhere. And then, of course, I think it would have been March 20th, if that was the Monday in 2020, when fundamentally the whole world went into lockdown. People were being either laid off or paid to stay at home, through furlough and do work or whatever it might have been. And
Yeah.
here's me. I was at first, second, and third stage interviews with some prospective employers, and overnight the whole thing just collapsed. And I was left thinking, well, who on earth is going to employ somebody like me at a time right now when actually people are being laid off, people are being sent home, government's paying for them to stay at home, frankly. Nobody knows how long this is going to last. All our sort of normal freedoms have gone. Yes, we've got internet, we've got Zoom, and that's when it became really proficient. But how long is this going to last? What's the next 6 months, 12 months going to look like? And so for me personally, I wouldn't say it's totally depressing, but when you're trying to work to something, and I know not everything's in your control, but then you see all the cards, in your hand, all your aces are going, you're left with twos, threes, and fours, and I can't win a hand with this. What actually am I going to do? So for that period, I actually realized that I'm going nowhere fast. As you remember from my LinkedIn profile, the middle one was coach. So I was a certified qualified coach, but you don't send coaches into burning buildings. So very few people that needed help and support, because they were probably struggling, although they were in paid employment, they were probably struggling with their own futures as well because of that time of uncertainty. Certainly times that none of us seen, I don't think, in our careers to date. So I just went into a process and a period of internalization and massive, massive self development, because I thought, I'm going to position myself in the very best place for whenever this happens. I'm going to come out the other side and I'm going to be ready. Okay, so I threw myself into doing lots of other courses online, threw myself into what you would have seen also as well, Tunde, the sort of virtual Toastmasters arena, put myself into contests, did some area roles for some leadership responsibilities. And I really used it as an opportunity to say that, yeah, I'm going to come out the other side of this in a much, much better position. So but I didn't feel great at the start of it because I had very, very little control. As we sort of started to come out the other side of it, the things I was doing started to put me in a much better position. And certainly the role I'm in now, believe it or believe it not, took, what was it? It was 9 interviews I had for
Wow.
that particular job. 9 interviews. The final interview was with the CEO. Now, unbeknownst to me, fundamentally, after about the second or third interview, they'd sort of made their mind up, and all the rest of them were like chats and discussions by future peers as to whether or not they could get on with me, sort of thing. But even so, that was an interesting process. But they said to me, "You're going to have 9 interviews. It's all going to be over by the end of February, and then we'll let you know." So, because I knew I was going through that process, I've done something in interviews that I've never done anywhere else. First and foremost, I asked 2 questions at the end of the interview. The one question was, how well do you think I performed during this interview? Did I answer the questions in the way that you wanted in terms of getting to understand me and my skills? Second question I asked was, who's interviewing me next and how should I prepare? And on every single occasion, the person that was interviewing me gave me an answer. Whether they'd been asked those questions or not previously, I don't know. But what it did, it set me up for the next interview. So in my mind, I was mentally prepared. I was stalking all these people on LinkedIn and trying to find out various things. But for me, that was like an inner preparation because, previously I'd had like 3 interviews and maybe a panel or a presentation type thing, but not 9. And so I just wanted to make sure I was investing so much that I wanted to get the right result at the end. And the preparation I did, during that COVID time about trying to become, as you alluded to at the start of this webinar, the best version of yourself. What's that in me? And how can I put that forward? And so it all worked very well, but it wasn't a comfortable time because I know it wasn't a comfortable time for most people, but I was slightly disadvantaged. I was just on the cusp of getting back into the job world, and then metaphorically the rug was pulled from under me. So it's a case of how do you deal? How can you become resilient in those periods to stay positive?
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, just like you said, the resilience is very important. And from your story, it just kind of reminded me because you talked about the period of COVID, how you're about to get a job, the rug was pulled under you, and many people in that situation just become bitter, but you decided to get better. And it just reminded me of what someone once said. I don't know how true it is, but someone once said that I think in Mandarin, that the way they write crisis is the same way they write opportunity if they write in Mandarin. So
Yeah.
that in every crisis there is an opportunity. So you should start asking yourself, what's the opportunity here, rather than saying, oh, it's a crisis. And you during that time you
Yeah.
invested in your learning, you got better, and it made you a better person. So I think the learning point for all of us is anytime there's a crisis, ask yourself, what's the opportunity here? Because in that crisis, in that shell of the crisis, if you crack it, there is an opportunity. And someone said problems come to make us better. So I think you've absolutely demonstrated and
Yeah.
you made that learning point for everyone today.
Yeah. And thanks. And you
Next
actually,
question as a follow-on.
go on, carry on. Sorry. Yeah.
I'll let you talk. You're the guest.
No,
I'm
okay.
listening
I
to
was
you.
just going to say you hit the nail on the head Tunde, a little earlier when he started talking about complaints or complaining
Yeah,
rather than offering solutions. That is
yeah,
the other side of the same coin, and you're absolutely right because it was a mantra of mine for many years. I think
yeah,
I took it from the Chinese language. I think you said Mandarin, but the
yeah.
word threats and the word opportunity is exactly the
Hmm.
same word. They see it
Right.
in those ways, and you're absolutely
Hmm.
right. You can think about something negatively or you can think about it
Yeah.
positively. And the more time you spend thinking about it negatively takes away from all the time you can think about what you're going to do about it by thinking about it positively. So, yeah, great reminder to everyone, I think.
Wow, great. Um, so Nigel, feel free to talk. I'm here to extract as much gems from you. Every time you talk, I'm getting something new. So just bust in and I'm talking. You can interrupt me anytime.
No worries.
So the next question I was going to ask you as a follow-on to that is not to brag, but what are some of your proudest achievements? And because we can also learn from how you're able to achieve some of those things. And yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you need to actually blow your own trumpet. Yeah, I know it's the
Okay.
world where we're like, oh, you
Well,
need to
yeah,
get
yeah.
humble. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I've got
tell
to
us
say,
about some things you've
yeah, I've got to
achieved.
say, so for an introvert, Sunday, it's really difficult to sing your own praises because very often you want other
Yeah.
people to do it for you. But I'll probably give you the most recent achievement, and it is over a time span of
Mm-hmm.
4 years. This is absolutely a true story. And if
Yeah.
somebody had told me in that 4 year period this was going to happen, I wouldn't have believed them. And it did actually happen. COVID was bang in the middle of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, Tunde, December the 1st is a really important day for me. First and foremost, because it's my birthday. Okay.
Okay.
But back in 2018, that's when I formally signed up for Toastmasters International. And for anyone on the call that is not familiar with that, that's a speaking club you can go to improve your presentation skills, overcome your fears, and build your confidence in public speaking. But it's also a place where you can develop leadership skills and active listening skills. And it's also a really great community of like minded people. So when I first joined, I thought I was a reasonable, okay speaker, but I needed to improve. And I remember maybe a couple of weeks after that, maybe in the new year of 20, it would have been 2019. So this 2018, December the 1st is when I joined. My first prepared speech at my club in Birmingham in the Midlands. And I was sitting there gripping the chair with everything, my life depended on it. I could feel a bead of sweat running down my forehead. My heart was palpitating, and I could feel the butterflies going around in my stomach in knots, and I was feeling really anxious. And they called my name up to go to the front, and I was sitting on the front table. It took me an age to get round to the front. I got there, I saw a lectern, I stood behind it and gripped it, for grim death. I looked up at the audience, and that was the last time I saw them because I just looked down at the floor and my notes for inspiration, and I was a shell of a speaker. Okay, I was very nervous, didn't come across great, fidgeting, put my hands in my pockets. My body language was saying nothing that lined up with the words I was saying. And then 4 years to the day, if you recall from the start of this talk, I mentioned that I put myself down as a conference speaker on my LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile. So December the 1st, 2022, just 4 years later, I was on the stage at a global project management summit, Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. There's a lectern there, and I got a room of over 250 people, and I needed to speak. The first thing I said, I went up to the lectern and said, I don't need this. And I just pushed it
Wow.
to one side and just stood in front of everyone on the stage and just started. Now, again, for me, that was massive because I think I said, partway through this talk as well, I had to believe I was enough to do this. 4 years ago, I wasn't. But through that journey of those 4 years, what I had to do, and I had to build myself and believe in myself and take the feedback from people that got me to that point. I had to believe myself. I'm good enough to be there. I'm good enough. I'm as good. And I know you told me not to compare against anybody else because you compare and
Yeah.
despair, of course. But I was as good as every other speaker at that particular conference because we were all selected, and I'd
Yeah.
got a right to be there. And the session went down really well. Went down so well, in fact, I got a lot of connections, a lot of people asking questions. I put a proposal in for 2023 that got accepted. That was in Atlanta. I put a proposal in early part of this year that got accepted. I'm off to California, Los Angeles in September this year to do the same thing. Different subject, slightly different audience, but it keeps me believing in that one of my goals is to be that conference speaker. And it's like, sometimes in life when you set a goal and you achieve it, you think to yourself, well, what's next? What's next? So I've achieved my goal 3 times now to be on the world stage, and that's like brilliant. You can't get any more than that. So what can you do after that? It's a bit like climbing Everest. If you climb Everest,
Mm-hmm.
or your version of Everest, well, where do you go next? Because there isn't anything higher than that. Well, maybe you start climbing other mountain ranges or wherever across each of the continents. Maybe you do Everest again. Maybe you tackle it from a different side. So for me, it's just like keeping it going because the more I do, the better I get, the more I enjoy it, the more it speaks to my passion in that regard. So I'm really proud and privileged to have conference speaker as a tagline on my LinkedIn profile because that actually is what I do. And we might get to talk about legacy at some point in this talk, and maybe that's one of the things that I want to get known
Mm-hmm.
for. Adding value, sharing, growing with people, those type of things.
Wow. Well, massive well done. I mean, how do you say when you've done it many times? I don't know what it is. When you're a conference speaker, a world stage conference speaker, you do it over and over again. But what's the term for that? What's the term for
Sorry,
that?
could you
You do
just repeat
something
that
over
last
and
one?
over again. What's the term for it when you do something
Uh,
over and over again? Like a renowned world speaker. Is that it? Yeah, that's the word. Can you
So,
hear me,
so
Nigel?
no, sorry, could you just repeat that, Tunda? I just lost a little bit there.
It's all right. I said massive well done for becoming a
Oh,
renowned
thank you, thank you,
world speaker. That's the word I was looking for.
thank you,
Brilliant.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
oh,
like
thank you, thank you. And in that process, by the
it's
way,
like a
Tunda, I have
series now. You're
learned.
just on a series Unstoppable.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think so. Uh, But it's also taught me how to write proposals that get accepted, so you get invited to these particular things, because that in itself is a bit of an art. But you have to do it and do it in a way that's unique and different to anyone else. And again, for an introvert, it's really difficult for me to sell myself. But I've realised that if I don't sell myself, nobody else is going to do it for me. So you have to think
Mm.
in a way that projects you forward, and you have to be a little bit unusual or a bit different to set yourself apart from, I wouldn't say necessarily the competition, but the other people that put proposals forward, so that you stand out head and shoulders, so that people certainly want to invite you forward. And it is something that once you, I guess it's a bit like scoring a goal. Back to our football analogy, if you're a striker and you keep scoring goals, you want to score more goals, because you get that rush, you get that buzz, it becomes a passion. Where you get a passion in life is where you find that time and energy to invest in it, because for you personally the returns are quite high. So at the moment, it's a bit of a sort of thing that keeps pushing me forward. In that, if all these opportunities, not all of them will come off. By the way, I have had some failures in some of these things where things have just been rejected. But on average, the more you put in, the more chance you have of some of these actually, if you like, not every egg is a bird sort of thing, but some of them may hatch and some of them may come to fruition and be viable. And those are the ones I just take advantage of, and in a sense, just push myself forward with.
Good, good. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's something that we also do not think about. There's some skills that we need to learn. They're not taught in everyday life, but if we could learn something, and that's one thing, if you pick up one thing that you could learn that could make you better, why not just work on that? Even if it was just one thing in a year, you've learned the art of writing proposals such that they are
Mm.
they are
Yeah,
they are accepted. How many people have actually thought about that? I need to learn about writing proposals,
yeah,
and
yeah.
look how far it's taken you.
Yeah, and that's another reason, Tunde. Actually, I spoke earlier about weaknesses. And there's a reason I'm not good at certain things, and there's a reason I don't do certain things, because I don't have time, the passion, the energy, or the interest for them. And
Mhm.
if I have to put those things into it, well, I will never get the passion for it, because it's not something I want to do. But when I have to put the time and effort into something that I'm not particularly interested in, the outcome is never great. So that's why I always sort of discard them and just focus on things which I think are important to me, because we're all different, we're all unique. And when you get into this team
Yeah.
environment, you will find that there are people that do things better than you, that you don't like doing, and vice versa. And as a team, you can
Mhm.
actually become more than the sum of your parts, in a sense, a really high performing team. And that's the sort of realm that I like to work in as well.
Great. You never believe it's 10 minutes to go, and it feels like we only started talking a minute ago. But let me just ask one question, because like I've seen one question from our audience. So I'll ask you perhaps one or two more questions, and then we'll
Sure.
go to the
Yeah.
question from the audience. So
Yeah.
the next question is, how do you balance life and work as a professional? I know a lot of people talk about work-life balance, but
Okay.
I find
So,
only very few people achieve it. But
okay.
yeah, this is the aim of the series. How can we
Okay.
become
Okay.
the best at what we do?
Okay, so I'll answer this question maybe more than one way, really, because early in
Yeah,
my career, I didn't particularly. We spoke earlier about when you're young, you think the world's your oyster,
yeah,
everything's achievable, and you've got so much time to achieve stuff in that you've got a really great, unadulterated, perfect path to wherever you want to go. It's only on the journeys you get beaten up through life you realize, oh, this is all too hard. But I can probably sum up my life, I guess, or my career in three acts. One is slaying the dragon. Okay, and I'll come on to these in a moment. The second one is saving the princess. And the third one for now, I've just called the third act. And I've called it the third act because I haven't quite got there yet, but I need to work out what it is I need to do. And probably it's something to do with retirement. But just going back to slaying the dragon, that was me leaving school, getting a career, thinking you have to be busy, effective, do stuff, and get things done and just, smash everything because it's there to be smashed. Work loads of hours. I think in my young life, because I got the energy and the enthusiasm, working longer hours wasn't so much of a thing then as it would be for me now. Okay, so I don't have necessarily the same amount of energy back then, but I probably do have more passion, but I use my time differently. And I remember when I was a young apprentice working at the Rover factory a long time ago, I used to look at people my age now and think, what do they do? They're just slow. They don't do much. They're not very, they're not very driven. They don't seem to be doing much. And somebody told me once, oh, it's all about the quality of decisions they make. I'm thinking, really? Because I think, action is what you want. You want to do stuff. And so the first part of my life, slaying the dragon, I was just sort of smashing it all over the place. I had no work-life balance because in those early formative years, you're trying to work out what your life is anyway. Then I get to a certain point in my life, which I call saving the princess, which is fundamentally saving myself. And it's touching on the things that you're going on about, which is put some boundaries in place. You can't have these things creeping up. So I'm a massive exponent of annual holiday is annual holiday. I don't expect people in my teams to be on holiday and do work. If we know when it's coming, we'll do things to transition that work. Nobody is indispensable. We just have to make sure we communicate and transition stuff. And it was one of the answers I got very early in my career, to be honest, Tunde, because again, working in the automotive industry, you're surrounded by people that are saying, oh, do you know what? I can't afford to go on holiday because this is going to fail or that's going to fall or whatever else. And somebody's at some point turned around and said, do you think we're going to stop making cars tomorrow because you're not here? And it was like, no, well, it doesn't matter then. This place is going to still keep going. So, yes, we've all got a small part to play in something bigger, but the entity is not going to stop. It might be a bit difficult in a certain area for a period of time, but it's going to keep moving. We're not as indispensable as we think we are. I think we just put proper planning in place. And I certainly have boundaries. Weekends, big for me now. I start my weekend as early on a Friday as possible, and I'll finish it as late on a Sunday as possible. So I'm really hoping after this, I've got another 4 hours before my weekend finishes. But I'm really clear. I'll turn off the computer at 6:30, and that's it. I'm done. If it's coming off after that, you'll have to wait till the following morning because early in my career, I would not have listened to myself. I would have done it and burnt myself out and not realised. The only thing I would say is I'd have more energy to do that then, but it's probably misspent energy. I think as I've gone through my career, it's more about, you know what, it's not that important. No one's going to die. It's fine. Think about 6 months down the road. Is anyone going to care? Probably not. And then the third act, which I haven't quite got to yet, is me and what I do next and what happens when I finish my career. Do I go out and do some consulting? Do I push the speaking engagements a lot more? Do I do something different? Because, in this day and age, most people with a decent, good career are probably going to spend quite a long retirement. So you've got to set yourself a purpose for that. And retirement's not about working; it's about enjoying. You've still got to have a north star, something you want to aim for, in that period.
Wow, I love how you sectioned into three things, three phases of your life. The first, slaying the dragon, and the interesting thing is a lot of people are still going in that phase till the very end without actually saving the princess. And then the last one is the third act. But it's just a few things I learned from that is I think you need to see the big picture. The world will go on without you. So sometimes you need to take care of
Yeah.
yourself, just like you said. And we should learn to disconnect sometimes. A lot of
Oh,
people,
yeah.
like Jim said, when they're at work, they're thinking about the beach. When they're at the beach, they're thinking about work. When it's time to shut down the laptop, shut down the laptop and disconnect. I mean, I even work in healthcare. Like you said, so you said nobody's going to die. Sometimes people might die, but even with
You know,
that,
I have to say that in jest, a little bit in jest, because my
yeah,
partner too, way back when, was a casualty nurse,
yeah,
and actually, you know, she's dealt, as you will see from the healthcare industry, Tunde,
yeah,
people do die. And so we're not,
yeah,
I can't say it the way she can, because
yeah,
she's had it, people in her arm, those type of things. So it's industry specific, but you know,
yeah.
what's the worst that can happen in the
That
industry
can
I'm in
happen.
is that that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. Someone's going to be upset for a short period of time, but I'm a big
Mhm.
believer that bad planning on someone else's part is not an emergency.
Yeah. Mhm. Sure. Wow. We've got only a few minutes to go, so I'll just go on to one of the questions that has been posted on the comment section. And there's a question from Paul. It says, "How do you overcome those setbacks of the past that creep into your mind at those pivotal moments?" So the example is when you spoke at the conference. How do you forget those first nervous speeches that you had? So how do you basically silence the imposter? I think that's how I put it.
Well, first and foremost, what the first thing I do have to say, Paul, is there was a 4-year gap between those two bookends, if you like. And the thing that made me realise, and I think I touched on it earlier on, is I've learned that COVID was a great grounder for me. I became a lot more mindful, and that made me believe in myself a lot more. And that was pivotal in that middle period of those two signposted dates. But I was growing. I was getting feedback from my peer group that I trusted, that I was good enough and I was enough myself. Put a lot of practice in, had a lot of fun in the process. And one thing I have learned is that we learn from times of greatest enjoyment, because I have to think to myself, what have I learned when I've been really stressed? How effective have I been? And the answer is not really. So it was all about belief in myself. Yes, I can think back to those times when I was gripping the chair. And if I think about it enough, I can start to feel the perspiration dripping. I can start to feel my stomach getting tied up in knots. But through those journeys over those 4 years, I've had really great times where, bang, I know I've got this. And what I do is channel that more negative feeling into positive feelings. I know I've got it and I've got it covered. And I do think it's a bit like going to the gym to exercise your body for your muscles, that doing these sort of things actually is a mind gym, you know. So you've got to believe in it, have the positive affirmations, say things out loud, truly believe in yourself, surround yourself with really great accountability partners and a peer group that you trust and support you in a really great way, and you'll see yourself grow. And very often, Paul, you'll see others will notice the difference in you before you see it in yourself. And when it comes from a trusted source, you can believe that. And when you believe that, you start going up the ladders of your own development and belief. When you're here, you know you've got it. One way or another, what you're going to deliver is going to be okay. Very famous quote from Winston Churchill, or someone of that ilk, when he once said, "I worry about a lot of things in life, but very few have ever happened." So very often we think about what the outcome might be, but very rarely is the outcome as bad as we think. We're our own worst enemies when it comes to self-criticism in that respect. So it's just channeling more to the positive and building yourself up and receiving that feedback from people that say they've enjoyed what you've done.
Oh, thank you so much for that very appropriate response. And Paula said very appropriate response,
You're
channeling the
welcome.
negative feelings into positive feelings. Yeah,
Not
and
easy,
not
by the way.
worrying.
Yeah.
I'm not worrying about the outcome. Um,
Yeah. Well, the other thing, of course, is being introvert. Generally speaking, you're more glass half empty.
yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
am certainly. If I was a bit more extrovert, I'll probably be more glass half full. That's what I'm trying to become. Trying to think about things slightly differently, because you put more effort into positive things, you're more likely to get more positive outcomes.
Wow, that's been a very productive. I was going to do something, and I think I'll do it. It will only take a minute. It's to play a game. It's just perhaps just know what your interests are. So this game is called the Choices game, and I'm just going to
Okay.
give you two choices, and you just tell me which is your. You don't really need to subscribe
Think.
to any of them, but just
Okay.
choose
Okay.
one. Okay,
Okay.
ready?
Go
It
for
only
it. Yeah.
take a minute. Go. So
Okay.
the first one, Mercedes or Audi?
Neither.
No, you have to choose one. That's the aim of the game.
Mercedes.
Good. Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Running or walking?
Walking.
KFC or McDonald's?
KFC.
Adidas or Nike?
Nike.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Day or night?
Day.
Beyonce or Rihanna?
Rihanna.
LeBron or Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan.
Audiobook or paperback?
Paperback.
Summer or winter?
Summer.
Cinema or theater?
Theatre.
Wow, it's been good to learn some few things about you, what you prefer. It's a very quick game, but it kind of tells what kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
things you like. You
Yeah.
you never can tell how much you can learn from that. But yeah, massive thank you to you, Nigel, and to everyone who's either watched or watched the replay. Massive thank you to Paul as well for his questions and his comments.
Yeah.
And as usual, as we like to end on this program, the way I always end is till we meet again, make sure you keep living with passion and purpose. I'll see you again next month. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thanks, everyone.